Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Living the Life Show. I'm your host, Columbus Cody. I'm so grateful to have you for today. Today, you're in for a treat. All right. I've been dying to get a chance to interview this guest, and you are in for a treat. So help me welcome to the show, Reverend K. Edward Copeland. How's it going, Pastor Copeland?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I cannot complain. I'm happy now. I'm happy. I get a chance to sit at the feet of a great man and learn a little bit.
I don't know about that, but I'm glad we get to connect. It's been a minute. We've been going back and forth, and I'm finally glad to be able to have this time and space with you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. Well, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to dive right in. Before we get to the meat, I always like to ask my special guest a few rapid fire questions just to get to know my guest. All right. So
Okay,
you don't even get a long time to prep these answers. It just boom, whatever pops in your spirit. Are you ready?
got it.
All right. What's your favorite sports team?
Ooh, Kansas City Chiefs.
Really?
I was born. I was born in Kansas City.
Okay, okay. We'll let it slide then. I thought, I was like, come on now.
No,
All
no,
right.
Kansas City Chiefs. I was what, either two or three when they were in this one of the first Super Bowls with the
Okay.
Green Bay Packers. So I've been a
Okay.
fan since I could talk.
All right, that'll work then. All right, because I'm saying we just finished the Super Bowl. That just I'm making sure there wasn't bandwagon, but we respect that. All right, all right. Next question: what's the best book you've ever read, excluding the Bible? You can't say Bible.
Ooh.
See, I love
Right
to
now,
ask
on
this
top of
question.
mind, right now, and it might be because I've been rereading it, but Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson.
Say the
And
name one more time.
the name of the book is Cast, Caste, The
Okay.
Origins of Our Discontent. They just made a movie out of it, or the movie is playing right now called Origin. It's based
Mm,
on that book. And um, I love her writing. She got the Pulitzer Prize for her first book, Warmth of Other Suns, which I thought was a masterpiece. And
mm,
this one's even better in my opinion because she is so meticulous in her research and
hmm
her historical analysis, but she's so lyrical and so artful in her writing. And it's
Beautiful.
hard, in my opinion, to find that that combination.
Yeah. Okay. I have to put that one on the list. I always love to ask this question because I get a chance to learn a few new great books I got to check out. Right. So
Yeah.
I selfishly ask that question of all my guests. All right. Which person in the Bible do you feel like you relate to the most? And tell me why.
Abraham, because um, I think we have similar. I think my temperament is similar to his, and I'm just fascinated about how he lived his life and how the Bible records his life. He didn't write any books. He didn't win any battles except that nighttime raid where he rescued his nephew Lot.
Hmm.
But yet he was known as God's friend
Yeah.
to the extent with God that God would come and sit down at the house with him, and that just always intrigues me, and
Mm,
I just love studying his life.
yeah. Yeah. You're my first Abraham. I've had a couple
Really?
Peters. Yeah. I've had Peters. I've had Pauls. I've never had Abraham. That is pretty awesome.
Hmm.
And it's funny because Peter is normally the people who select Peter are the people who still struggling with the fight inside of them. It
Right,
always
right.
makes me laugh. My dad, I interviewed my dad, and his was Peter. So he has a
Huh.
T-shirt that said, "Half Jesus, half Peter. Run up on me and see which one you get," or something like that. Now, and it's funny. All right, so I got to give my dad a shout out. He sent me your book. Okay, my father's a retired pastor in Chicago. He
Huh.
sent me your book, uh, Riding in the Second Chariot, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Uh, and he told me, I told him, Dad, I'm finally getting a chance to interview him. He said, ask him why his book ain't in circulation anymore. I can't find the book. And I was like, well, because I ain't giving him mine back. You know what I mean? But he told me to ask you that. So, make sure you let me know why the book is so hard to find. So
I sure will.
that way he knows that I was an obedient son. All right, what's your favorite hobby?
Ooh. You know what? It's strange that you should mention that because I'm literally searching for a new hobby. I'm a musician, so I don't know that music counts, even though I use it as a hobby. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, I'm into gardening. You see some plants behind me, and there's a whole bunch of plants over to my right. This is in my office,
Mm-hmm.
and so I find gardening therapeutic. Not just these house plants, but definitely when the weather allows, I'm out in my backyard. I have container gardens and all that type of thing, and
So is
I
it
find that
just
very
flowers, or do you have like veggies and all that?
no more. Inside, I have flowers and house plants and different types of things. But I like in the spring and summer, I like growing stuff I can eat.
Okay.
I have
Yeah,
flowers too, but it's mainly vegetables and
I
fruit
got you. Okay. Cool beans. All right. What's your favorite vegetable that you've been able to grow then?
that I've been able to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I every year grow some good collard greens,
Okay. Okay. Now you
and
from Kansas City. You know how to cook collard greens.
my wife does. My wife is an excellent cook.
She's from
She
Mississippi.
No, strangely
Oh.
enough, my wife is from Oakland, California, but
Uh-oh.
we lived in Kankakee, Illinois for a number of years, where my parents were located and where I grew up. Mostly black people in Kankakee came from Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a quick study. So my wife can make tea cakes, butter roll, hot water cornbread, just like an old Mississippi woman.
Uh-oh. See, now you're making me hungry. All right. Last question before we dive into the meat. What's your favorite book in the Bible?
Psalms, because you see the full range of human emotions. It's
Mm-hmm.
um, lyrical. There's a psalm for everything that you could possibly be going through, and um, I just I just love the authenticity, the honesty,
Mm.
of the psalmist. And so I spend, even though I read through the Bible regularly, I'm going to spend um, some time every day in the Psalms and in Proverbs.
Mm-hmm. Is there a specific psalm you love the most? There's one that like you go to all the time?
Hmm, that's a good question. The
Because
one I pray the most is, so every morning I pray a portion of Psalm 19 and what is that? Psalm 86, I think it's verse 11, where it says, teach me, O Lord, and teach me your ways, O Lord, and I will walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. I
mm,
will give you thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will praise you forever and ever. So that, along with Psalm 19, I pray literally every day. So it's hard to say what's my go-to because there's some psalms along with those two that I pray regularly, and then there's others that I go to depending on where I am emotionally that day.
hmm, yeah. And so my pastor loves Psalms 100. My
Mm.
my favorite book is Proverbs. So I'm right behind you in the next
Oh,
book, Proverbs, and I just love to glean from the wisdom. I'm like, Lord, I just give me a portion of that wisdom that Solomon had,
exactly,
and it's
exactly.
just beautifully written, and
Hmm.
makes you scratch your head sometimes. The other day, my 14-year-old texted me. He took a screenshot, and I'm telling you, it blessed me so much. He took a screenshot of where he was reading in his Bible, and he was like, "Dad, I read this, and for some reason, I feel like it should be important to me, but I don't
Mm.
understand what it means. Can you help me?" And
Mm.
it was the verse about how you should never basically put your name on the line for someone else, like strike your
Mm.
name to someone, and I was explaining to him how co-signing works. If he wants a car and he can't afford it, and I vouch for him, I put my reputation, my name on the line for him, even if he doesn't come through, I'm now responsible. So the verse was explaining to you it's not wise to do such a thing, and it just blessed me. One, that my son was reading his Bible on his own. Two,
Right.
that he still values dad's advice or dad's guidance spiritually, so I really appreciate it. It blessed me tremendously. So
It
yeah.
should. You don't get no better than that.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, Proverbs is the bomb.com. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So It's time for some questions, some deep questions, some meat. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we talked about your book, but let me ask you this. Why do you think God inspired you to write this wonderful, wonderful book?
Well, let me tell you um, how and why it was written, and then I'll try to answer that question as succinctly as possible. So, back in the day, the National Baptist Convention um, started a Young Pastors and Ministers division. Uh, Dr. Steve Bland was the first president. My father was the advisor. I was the fifth vice president responsible for the associate ministers. And at that time, we needed a curriculum for the associate ministers that would be attending Congress and convention. And the only thing out at that time was a book by, I forgot his first name, but his last name was Nance. And the book was like God's Armor Bearer.
Mm.
That was the only thing that was available at that time. And so uh, Pastor Bland said, well, man, we need a curriculum for the associate ministers. And so I started putting together some things as relates to what I had learned from my father and being under the pastors that I had befriended, who were my father's friends, as well as a pastor I had sat under while I was in law school, Dr. Lester L. Cannon. And after I did all of that, and I also want to mention Reverend Marvin E. Wiley too, because he's the one who said, Cope, I told him, I said, man, I got to write this curriculum. He said, what you need to call it is riding in the second chariot, because fellas don't know how to ride in the second chariot. I said, okay.
Mm.
So the title came from Marvin E. Wiley. The impetus for writing the book was because at that particular moment in history, there was nothing that we could use as a curriculum for the associate ministers in the Young Pastors and Ministers Division of the National Baptist Convention.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote all that, and after I wrote it and we taught it and it seemed like it was useful, then I just went ahead and put it in a book.
Yeah.
So in terms of why God chose me, I mean, no particular reason other than he just likes to choose unlikely suspects to get work done.
Right.
And
Right.
I had no better sense than I'm kind of a lack of a better word. I'll try anything, even if I don't feel like I'm qualified. If you say, well, hey, we need this, well, I'm gonna try to do that, even if I don't think I'm the best one, because if nobody else is stepping up, I'm gonna try it.
Right.
That's how actually, on a side note, that's how actually I became a musician. My father pastored in Kankakee, Illinois for 38 years. He passed away last September at 90 years old. But while he was pastoring, he used to have trouble with musicians. And as a teenager, like a junior in high school, I would hear him, complaining and see the woes he was going through. I said, look, buy me an organ. I'll learn how to play, and you won't ever have to worry about that anymore.
Wow.
So he bought me an organ. I learned how to play, and that's how I became a musician. Not because I had some natural or some extraordinary, some kind of passion or inclination, but I saw a need. I saw nobody was feeling it. And I said, look, give me the tools. I'll do it. So that's basically how, in the same fashion, the book came about.
Yeah. So are you self-taught as a musician, or did you take lessons? How did that work?
So by God's grace, I was always in good choirs while I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some type of familiarity with reading music, at least to sing it. But in terms of learning how to play in the community in which we live there in Kankakee, Illinois, there was a Church of God in Christ church named Fairhaven Church of God in Christ, Elder Carl Randall. His musician was named Dwayne Rucker. And Dwayne used to let me sit up on the organ with him during service. And I would just watch him and, learn from him. And then my father bought me an organ, and Dwayne used to come over to my house and just play for hours, and I would tape him. And so that's how I learned.
Wow. I mean, and that's such a beautiful thing, that number one, that you saw the struggle your father was having to deal with, and that you cared enough to say, let me see if I can fill that void. Number two, because there's two types of people I really, really honor and respect. People that learn a musical instrument and people who learn another language, right?
Mm,
Because it
yeah.
requires dedication from you that most people aren't willing to put forth. It's
That's
like, I want to learn how to play piano. You take 2 lessons, you're like, okay, I'm done with it. No, I mean, like, I'm willing to sit at this piano for 6 hours and just to get my fingers to obey me and do it. That it's just something I honor, that a person is going to listen to a tape 5 hours a day so they can learn Spanish or Japanese, or you know what I mean? It's just something that I've
right, right.
always grown to appreciate. So that's pretty admirable of you. And that same spirit probably, you know, transfers over to almost everything you do, in that, and because as a pastor you almost have to have a drive that if no one else is going to do it, I'm gonna have to do it. Not that you
That's
want
exactly right.
to, but you have a
Right.
spirit that nothing is beneath me to get done. But at the same time, Lord, send me some help.
Man, are you reading my email? That's
Right.
exactly right.
Right.
That's
Well, no,
exactly
I
right.
told you my father's a retired pastor, and I have never accepted a calling on my life as it relates to being in ministry, right? People make comments like, "Oh, you're gonna be a pastor one day." My dad has said it. My pastor has said. I'm like, no, I don't feel God calling me to do that. I have never professed a calling on my life, even as a minister, as it relates to, a title. I teach Sunday school, I speak at my church periodically. I love doing that, but I've never, and I've prayed this. This is what I always pray, Lord, if this is what you want from me, I will honor it, I will obey it, but I need to hear you say it, not these other people. I need to know it's you and not something. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh
so
no, that makes perfect sense.
my pastor said, "Why can't you accept that your father and my words is God telling you?" And I said, "I hear what you're saying, Pastor, and I love it. I gotta hear it differently. I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but I need to hear it differently."
I know exactly what you're saying.
So your book again was an encouragement to me, and it was very enlightening, very easy to read. I loved it because I love when a person writes a book that is not filled with all this technical jargon. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
To where it's like you're trying to show me how smart you are, but when I walk
Right.
away, I don't have anything. Well, when I read your book, I was like, I like that. I like that. I like that. And I have a desire to be a great help to my pastor, right? So going back to the title again, going back to that title, riding
Hmm.
in the second chariot. Help me understand, because I know you said the other pastor gave you that title, but for
Hmm.
people who don't understand what that means, how would you briefly explain what that means? Riding in the
Well,
second chariot.
well, the biblical reference, of course, is Joseph in the book of Genesis. After God used him to interpret Pharaoh's dream, the Bible says that Joseph rode in the second chariot. He was the prime minister. He was Pharaoh's right hand man, and there was nothing. If you read Joseph's life story there in Genesis, starting with what Genesis 37 on through 50, every place Joseph went or worked, whoever was supervising him, the Bible says very clearly about them that they didn't worry about anything under
Mm,
Joseph's charge. They didn't even concern themselves about anything except what they ate that day. Knew with Joe on the job, everything was going to be taken care of. So the
mm,
idea from this biblical reference is that as associate ministers, as leaders in the church, we ought to be so in tune with the vision of the house, so connected to the heartbeat of our leader, so
mm.
meticulous in our help that that leader shouldn't have to worry about anything under our charge.
Wow. And again, because I get a chance to talk to my pastor, I listen to my dad. That's probably one of the main reasons I know I'm like, Lord, please don't call me to be a pastor. Like, I don't mind being a teacher, a speaker, a minister. Don't call me to be a pastor. And my pastor, again, so full of wisdom. I love my pastor to death. He says, before you became a father, did you know how to be a father? I was like, no.
Mm.
God will provide everything you need to do the job he calls you to do. Just trust me on that. That's what he tells me. And I was like, again, Pastor, I appreciate that, but I need you to stop speaking those words. Please, please stop it.
Well, strangely enough, I can really relate to where you are, because before I accepted my call to the preaching ministry, I was I literally was saying the exact same words that you're saying, because seemingly everybody around me was trying to call me to preach, but I had recognized, I can't remember if it was my father's father in the ministry. My father's father in the ministry was Reverend Wallace F. Hartsfield, who pastored great Metropolitan Baptist Church in Kansas City, Missouri. And I would have conversations with him and older pastors. And bottom line, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Manuel Scott. But anyway, the old preachers would say, whoever calls you has to keep you. And that stuck in my mind. And so even as different ones would say this and say that, I would, in my mind, I was like, well, God needs good laymen too. God needs good, people who can teach the Bible, who aren't necessarily clergy and all those types of things. And I think it's in the first chapter of my book, second chapter talks about this idea of a burden, that the calling, we call it calling, some other church traditions might call it something else. But in the Bible, it talks about, at least in the prophetic books, talks about this burden that the Lord puts on you. And I think I understand what you're saying, and I think you're wise in the sense that you have to know beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Lord himself has called you, because there are going to be times in your life, and this is true for any calling. I mean, he calls people to more than the preaching ministry. Right. He calls people to various types. I have a godson who has been called to education, and I have another friend who felt the Lord, and I remember praying with him. He says, man, I feel the Lord is calling me to go into law enforcement. So I believe the Lord will call you, but you have to be able to listen very clearly to his voice and know without a shadow of a doubt that he's the one that's called you, because your hope has to be in him. That's why I love Abraham so much, because he didn't know where he was going. He didn't have no Bible. Right. And he literally had to listen to the voice of God to the extent that it inconvenienced other people. I'm sure his wife wasn't happy about wandering, and not knowing where we're going to wind up and stuff. Right. But he was confident that, no, the Lord has called me to this, and I'm going to obey his voice. And so I commend you in that respect, that you do have to be 100% sure. And in point of fact, I will go so far as to say, if you can do anything else but preach, then you haven't been called to preach.
I like that,
because he has a way. What did Paul say? It's hard to kick against the pricks. That's the old King James translation of Paul's encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ. And even though we usually don't put much stock into that little phrase, I think it speaks to something that is true, and that is that God has a way, be it through pressure, be it through circumstances, be it through just hearing his voice really clearly. He has a way that you're going to eventually do what he's called you to do, and you can't kick against the pricks. I mean, he'll lead you and he'll guide you.
Because it's so funny, because everyone will say, you just running. And I said, listen, I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate that you see that in me, right? I told God, if whatever you require of me, I will do it. But I need you to make it so plain that it's you and not someone else. You know what I mean? Right. And so I will patiently await for him to make it super plain for me. So I ain't in no rush. I continue to serve in my lane where I'm at. And I'm satisfied with that until he tells me to do something else. So, it'd be different if I was sitting back doing nothing, but I'm serving the Lord in some capacity. If he wants me to serve in a different way, I will honor that and I will obey that. So, and I don't mind riding in the second chariot. I'll even get in the third chariot. Here's your next question. If you could implant one specific trait in all associate ministers or laymen of the church, what would you choose and why? And you only get one character trait, one specific trait.
One character trait. That's a great question. I don't know if this is a character trait. Let's see if it qualifies. I would say what I would like to see in every associate is a supreme hunger for God. Now, I don't know if that's a character trait or if that's a passion.
Well, I mean,
Um,
passion would be a trait, like an insatiable
okay.
hunger for God.
Yeah, if they're really going after God, then a lot of the other character traits that are essential and necessary, like faithfulness, like coachability or teachability, um, like humility, all these other character traits, which ran across my mind as you asked that question.
Hmm.
I think all of those will come to the fore if somebody is really hungry for God. Because
Yeah.
I have seen people, to be honest with you, I have seen people, associates, who are loyal, but they're not hungry.
Mm,
And so they're around, but they never grow.
mm,
I've seen others um, who are humble, who will never raise up or anything like that, never be disrespectful, but they're not hungry, so they don't ever get anything done. They're humble
wow.
and they don't ever fight, but
Mm,
they don't do anything. I've seen others who are hungry for a position and are sort of vying. Uh, uh, Dr. Manuel Scott would call them gavel grabbers, who are grabbing for the gavel, who
Gavel
want
grabbers.
position. But if you're hungry for God, you can wait for your turn and
Mm,
you can be satisfied with whatever position God wants you to play on the team. So
mm.
for me, at this stage of my life, I'll take any. See, if you're hungry for God, I can teach you everything else. I can teach you what faithfulness looks like, what loyalty, what all these other things are. But if you don't have any hunger for God, uh, what does
A-
Paul say? He says something about that in what Second Timothy chapter 2. The things that I've shared with you in the presence of others, you know, commit this unto faithful men who can also teach,
mm,
others. This generational sort of way that discipleship and spiritual formation is supposed to be transferred. For me, if you're not hungry, ain't too much I can do with you.
yeah. So, for as it relates to you having associates under you, do you
Mhm.
ever pray for an increase of their hunger, or is there anything you can do as their leader to enhance their hunger?
That's a very good question. So to answer your question, yes, I do pray. I'm praying right now for help because in light of what the Lord is doing in the life of the church, I just need more hands. I have two very faithful, loyal, hungry associates right now. But to answer your question, how do you increase the hunger that somebody has? It has to be. It's almost like discipleship in any other area. It's through modeling and exposure. So
Hmm.
I have to show them that I'm not satisfied with where I am and
Mm,
that I'm going after God through, personal Bible study, through consecration. We're in a church wide fast right now, through, enhancing and developing new disciplines of the faith that will keep me going after Him. So part of it has to be caught and not
mhm.
necessarily taught. It
Yeah.
has to be sort of modeled for them. And there is an element, however, to your point, there's an element of challenging, of charging, of sort of prodding. The Bible speaks very clearly about stimulating and provoking one another,
Hmm.
under love and good works. And there's ways that men need to do that with men in terms of, man, where you at? How you and checking in on certain things. So I have mentors. This is what I mean by modeling. So I have mentors. So it's not that I'm the grand poobah and you just gotta listen to me and I'm not listening to nobody.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
have people pouring into me to make sure I'm staying hungry and they can see that. so that they can receive, oh, okay, this is how this thing works.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I'm not just pouring into other people, or I'm not just, setting myself as the king of the hill, that I have to be poured into in a constant way. And that when I'm dry, when it seems like my hunger uh, is waning and I need to dial it up, then I'm honest about that and I figure out new ways to go hard after God.
Mm, yeah, that's beautiful. So modeling, I get a chance to see even my pastor's hunger never ceases.
See?
Or if it's waning, even he self checks and goes, you know what, I need
Hmm.
another dose. I need, I need that whatever's dampening my appetite. I need that to be cast away. Yeah,
Right.
beautiful, beautiful. All right, moving right along. Here's your next question. Can you share any personal experiences from your own journey as serving as an associate minister that highlights some of the principles you have in your book? Like some of the things that you went through personally as an associate?
That's a very good question. I think I put some things in the book. I'm trying to think of a particular thing. Well, let me just share. So when I was my father's um, executive assistant, there would be times where there would be church fights, or there would be things that would happen where I would ask my father, if you're not going to do anything about this person and how they're treating you, move out of my way and let me do it. In other words, um, there were times where I felt that my father, as my pastor, was not being responsive enough to something that I saw. But what I came to learn over the years with him was that in the second chariot, you don't see everything you see in the first chariot. It's just like
Mm,
somebody who's in the driver's seat versus somebody in the passenger seat.
hmm
The passenger might say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. But they're not looking in the rear view mirror. They can't see everything, in the side mirrors that
yeah.
the driver is seeing. They don't have the angle
hmm
that the driver has. And one of the things I had to learn as an associate minister was to recognize very often I don't have the full story. And so my father used to talk to me about two things in particular. He said, number one, time. He said, this frustrated me to the end. He used to say, time is on my side. And I was
Mm,
like, time is on your side. Well, Dad, you need to do this. You need to do this now. You need to blah, 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 blah. And what he was, in general, what he would be talking about would was the fact that sometimes he was more patient with people than I was.
hmm
But by God's grace, over time, come to find out he was right, because some of the people that, and he explained it to me this way. One of his brothers, my uncle, was a notorious, like, um, how can I say this? He was a trickster. He was a ladies' man. He was uh, a character.
hmm
He fooled around and got into a situation which was typical for him, where somebody shot at him and they shot his shot him in the hand.
mm,
Now, problem was he was a construction worker, very, I mean, like he was a top construction worker. I mean, a skilled craftsman.
hmm
Uh, and so the issue came where the doctor said, "Well, we got to make a decision. Are we going to operate or are we going to amputate?"
mm,
And my uncle called my dad in. My dad said, "Well, get a second opinion." So got a second opinion, and the doctor said, "Well," said, "if I," he said, "there's a such and such a percentage chance that if I operate, that I can save the hand."
hmm
He said, "We can amputate." He said, "But," he said, "I want to give it a shot." And so my dad told my uncle to let him operate before you amputate.
mm,
He operated on it, and it came out, and my uncle was able to go on, the rest of his career. And my dad would use that as an example. He said, "Son, you real quick to amputate." He said, "But I'm trying to operate. I'm trying
oh,
to rescue some people."
wow.
And there are people who are very successful pastors right now who came up under my father, who had I had my druthers, I
Right.
would have amputated, but my father operated, and those pastors are succeeding. They're doing
Wow.
exceptionally well
Mm,
as we speak because he had the patience, because he
mm,
had another angle. He could see something I couldn't see. He was
yeah.
praying in ways that I wasn't praying.
Yeah.
And so he was able to, gently, and at his funeral, it was just here in September, person after person got up and testified
Mm,
with thankfulness of how he treated them, how he worked with them when others would have cut them off, and how now, literally, thousands are being blessed because he didn't listen to me. He had a
mm,
different angle. Time
yeah.
was on his side.
That
So that
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 is
would be
awesome.
one of the things I would
Yeah.
share.
Mm. That is awesome. When you was talking about how, as the lead pastor versus the associate ministers, how you don't see the big picture. Some of the things pastor hadn't even shared with you because of
Exactly.
confidentiality, because of, so
Exactly.
you can't make an informed decision without having all of the details, right?
All the details.
And but that also comes with growth. I'm sure even as a young pastor yourself, when you finally were under your father's leadership, you were leading yourself, leading, by yourself. You probably made decisions early on that you wouldn't make now because out of experience, I've learned now to slow down. You know, la-
Exactly.
last few weeks, in Bible study, my pastor's been talking about James, and it was like, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Say it with me, quick to hear, slow to speak, because we always flip those. We're quick to speak, slow to hear.
Slow to hear
It's like,
and quick to wrath. Right.
quick to wrath. If
I'm
I'd have just slowed down and listened a little bit more, I'd have made a decision that doesn't make me feel foolish. And now that I feel foolish, I have to fight my pride to reconcile this thing. And like you said, your dad, through his wisdom, time is on my side. Trust me.
yeah.
Just give this
It,
time. You will see in the long run, dad knows what he's talking about.
and here's the funny part about it, because now I've experienced it and I can understand his perspective. That sometimes the people who were like me back in the day who wanted him to do it, those some of the people who want me to act quick with
Hmm.
other people want me to be patient with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you want me to give you grace and patience, but you want me to
Abs-
operate with you, but you want me
yes.
to amputate them. I'm
Yes.
like, no,
Yes.
no, that ain't how that works. The other thing, the other thing that goes with that, before I forget it, one of the other things he would say in terms of why, you have to be patient and let the Spirit speak to you, is because you don't know who's connected to who a lot of times, particularly as a young pastor. This is
Hmm.
advice he gave me, in the sense that, yeah, you're trying to uproot this person, but you don't know the subterranean connections. You don't know the
Mm.
family connections. You don't know the
Yeah.
friendship connections. So yeah, that might be a weed, but before you pull it, you better know for sure
Right.
and understand what good thing they might be connected to. And so yeah, you yank that up, but you done destroyed four other plants over here
Mm.
that you didn't know were connected
Yeah.
because of long time friendships, because of
Hmm.
family relationships you're not aware of, because of whatever type of thing.
And because
So
they may not be spiritually mature enough to say, hey, I get that you and pastor didn't fell out, but this is my church home and I can't just uproot because you choose to uproot. Now, I'm
right,
following with you. I'm hey, and they look down the road sometimes like I should have never left with them because I should have stayed with pastor.
exactly, exactly.
Should have stayed with
It's
pastor. All
a whole
right.
thing.
Are you ready for the next one? Some of these you might have actually hit, so I might have to gloss over a few more because you hit some good ones. I wrote here, what advice would you offer pastors about effective delegation and efficiently utilizing those that serve under their leadership? Like,
Mm.
how do I delegate effectively? And then how do I get the most out of the people that serve under me?
This is a very good question. So I don't know if this is the correct order, but let me at least start right here. Number one, you got to know the capacity of your team.
Mm,
Um, my father was, um, my father, in his first pastorate, he worked part time at the local school. and he became the football coach of the local high school. The year before he became the coach, they had lost all but one. They had lost every game but one. The year he took over, they won every game except the last game, the championship game. And the way he turned it around was, the first thing he did is he analyzed the capacity of the team members.
Mm-hmm.
Who, and what he found out was, they had a guy playing linebacker who was actually a quarterback, had a guy playing this that was actually that. And so the first thing you got to do is know your team. You got to
Mm.
know the capacity of the people that are under your charge, so that you don't have unrealistic expectations, or so that you don't minimize, or that you underestimate them when there's more that they can
Provide.
provide.
Yeah.
Getting everybody, what's that old book? Um, I think it's Good to Great, where it talks about, not only getting the right people on the bus, but in the right seats on the bus.
Mm.
So there's a capacity issue. But assuming you're working with a team and you sort of understand what their capacity, what this individual's capacity is, before you can delegate, you need to indoctrinate. You need to, for lack of a better word, you need to train them, educate them, model for them exactly what it is that you want done, so that so that they watch me, then we do it together, and then I watch you, and then now I can delegate it to you.
Mm. Yeah.
Watch me do it first.
Uh-huh.
Let me show you how to conduct a service. Let me show you how to do communion, how to do baptism. Let me show you what it means, to run a meeting, da 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 da. Let me show you, and after I show you, I'm gonna debrief you
Mm.
to like, okay, now did you notice I did this? Now let me explain why I did that, and da 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 da. Okay, now next time you do it with me. We're gonna leave this meeting, or we're gonna, you know, uh, I'm gonna have you do a portion of worship, whatever it is. We're gonna do it together,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're gonna debrief, and then I'm gonna watch you do it, and then we're going to debrief, and then now I can feel comfortable in saying, okay, now let me delegate this to you, and you can report back to me, and so on and so forth. But all of those steps are necessary. The whole recognition of what I'm dealing with, what is their capacity, what is their learning style, what is their
Mm.
personality type, all that type of thing. The whole, okay, now watch me do what it is that I'm eventually delegate to you. Watch me do it. Or if I'm not good at it, because I can delegate something to somebody that I'm not necessarily good at, but I bring in somebody that can do it the way I want it done,
Right.
right? Either
Right.
way, I got to find a way to model for them what it is that eventually I'm a delegate.
Right.
Let's model it, debrief. Let's do it together, debrief. Let me watch you do it, and then we're going to debrief. And now I'm going to delegate it to you.
I love that. I love that you debrief after each one.
Oh, you got to.
I had a professor at TSU. 'Cause I'm a health and physical education major. So I've been a teacher for
Oh,
22 years. And my professor said anything worth doing is worth assessing. Anything you
mm,
do that you don't assess, it's a waste of your time because you can't
right.
grow from it. So what you said was, I'm gonna model it and then I'm gonna talk to you about what I did. And I've coached basketball for forever, right? And
Mm,
I always thought about how as coaches we try to hold kids accountable for something we didn't teach them. You can't do that, right?
you can't
So
do
I'm
that.
screaming box out, but I never work on boxing out. It's not it's not feasible for me to expect something of you that I did not model or did not teach you and didn't drill you and drill you and drill you. Because if I do that effectively, like you said, we get to that last stage, I delegate it to you, and all you do is just report back. You get it done. And not only do you get it done with the same spirit I would do it in, right?
Now that's the key thing that differentiates ministry, say, from the business world or whatever. It's not just the doing it. Are you doing it in the spirit that
Mm,
I would do it with the
yeah,
same type of compassion? Are you in sync with the vision of the house and how we do things?
yeah.
So, right now, what I'm doing with my associates, I started, I don't know if that was, I used to do it with the first group of associates, but this group, I just started back, I think a couple years ago where, okay, I know what my preaching schedule, my preaching calendar is like 6 months out.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do with them is, okay, I used to tell them, okay, well, I'm going to do an outline. You submit your outline. I want everybody to give an outline of whatever the text is that is for this Sunday, so that even if something happens to me, that I know you'll have at least studied and whatever. If I stop doing that, what I start doing now is I bring them into my study over here at this long table when I'm starting my sermon. Like I, I haven't looked at it before I bring them in because I want them to see, okay, how do you study? How do you first start? How do you whatever? So they're watching from the very beginning, the first time I opened the Bible to
That
that
is
passage
awesome.
to the end, so that even after the sermon, we can debrief and they have seen the whole process.
Yeah, that is
So
awesome.
now they know, okay, this is why we do this way, or that's why we do blah blah blah, whatever. And it's not left to guesswork because, like you said, very often we're trying to get players to do something that we just assume they know how to do, but we've
Right.
never actually drilled them on
You can't assume anything, you know.
it. Not at all. Not at all.
I was teaching baseball to my class one day, and I had a lot of students in my class that were from different countries, not from America. And so
Mm,
I'm like, all right, we're playing baseball today. So this girl comes up to the bat, she swings, she hits it really good. She runs straight to third. Everybody bust out laughing. And I was like, you know what? You never taught them how to play this game. They don't know first, second, and third. They're not from America. And there's people in America that don't know how to play this game. So
right.
from that moment forth, I recognize, as you said, I have to not only tell you where first is, I walk to first. I walked to second. I walked to third. I even walked home and showed them that unless you step on this base, you still have not
Mm,
scored. You know,
mm.
and they, even though you've ran past it and you've gone back to the back of that line, if they want to, they could throw it home and they could step on this base and you're still out. You have to step on. So I go through all the steps. And you know what happens? You end up having to be like Noah. You got to preach it 40 years straight.
Now, now, see, this is something that associates as well as pastors have to understand because the Bible even talks about this. I can't remember if it's Peter or Paul who basically said it's not burdensome for me to repeat this to you, but it's helpful for you that you cannot over communicate.
Mm,
You think that people got it, and see, sometimes also we make the mistake of thinking that exposure means experience. That because they've been around whatever, been around good preaching, don't necessarily mean you know how to start and how to put it together.
yeah, yeah,
Or you've been in good meetings, but nobody really showed you. Okay, here's how you run a good meeting. Make sure you got an agenda. Make sure you thought through all that kind of stuff.
hmm
And I think that one of the things with the Christian walk that we underestimate is repetition. That the Bible is very clear, and even Paul, even when you think about even Jesus. I mean, there's a lot of things he had to keep on repeating.
hmm
And then even after now think about it. This is Jesus, and he was with the disciples for 3 years, day
Right.
and night. After the resurrection, he said, you know what? I'm going to stay around another 40 days with these jokers just to, whatever. And then they still was asking questions, Acts chapter 1,
Mm,
is it at this time you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And in my mind, I imagine Jesus like, these Hebrews right here. I've
right.
been telling you, but
Oh, how
he had to
long will
keep
I be
on.
with y'all? My
How long will I be
goodness.
with you? So if he had to keep repeating and he didn't get aggravated, then we got to make up in my mind that we cannot over communicate, that it's
Mm,
not burdensome to drill, to repeat, to go over things. You said your pastor had you all repeat the verse in James
hmm
chapter 1
Yeah,
over and
say it
over again.
again.
And I
Say it.
guarantee
Say it again.
next week he gonna review it again and say, now what did we
hmm
talk about last week?
Yeah.
And then gonna go back over it. And
Yep.
it may be the eighth time. Now think about this. In the marketing world, they say that you need to watch a commercial like 7 times before it like gets the traction. That's why when
Mm,
you're watching some uh, ball game or whatever, you'll see the same commercial.
yeah.
Like, man, how many times are they gonna
Right. How
Run
many
this
times the
commercial.
Geico come on? Man, the little
Man, how
lizard.
many? I'm tired of this geek,
Right.
Gexo, whatever he is, of this caveman. But they know
Right.
it's not until that seventh time that it's actually
Mm.
registering, and they're gonna keep on repeating it until you can't not think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking about what you just said with repetition as relates to the Christian journey. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm not a huge Alabama fan, but I acknowledge greatness. Nick Saban is the greatest, right? And he said something that once I heard it, I like immediately wrote that in my phone. He said, most people practice until they get it right. At Alabama, we practice until we can't get it wrong. And I was like,
Mm.
wow, like, you know, excellence is what we do because that's all we know to do. Like that's
Yeah.
all we know. So I keep drilling, keep drilling, keep drilling because eventually my muscle memory. I'm not sure if you're an NBA fan, but you look at Steph Curry, the dude can
Right.
shoot blindfolded. His body just knows what to do. And I always think about it as our spiritual lives. We could walk so closely with God that we could forget how to sin, like forget, and God placed in my spirit one time, this elderly lady in my church, she handed me her phone. She said, brother, can you put this in my phone? And it was a flip phone. And when she handed
Mm.
it to me, I couldn't remember how to use a flip phone. I was like, how do like my brain? Now part of me knew I had a connection to, because I used to have a flip phone, but I haven't been connected to this in so long. I don't remember how to use this. And
Mm.
God placed in my spirit that if you walk with me long enough, you'll forget how to sin. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
you will forget how to do that sin. Now, don't get me wrong, sin is going to always present itself, but you've been away from that for so long, it's foreign to you now, you
Right.
know,
Right.
and it's not something you're trying to do, it's who you are. So you just be. And I was like, wow, so it was just so cool to illustrate, because my brain, I'm telling you, I could be driving to work and look up at the billboard, and God will give me a whole nother illustration of something. Like today, I drove past a house that had a trash can out, and
Huh.
today's Tuesday. My trash day is Friday. Their trash can is out on a Tuesday. Their trash day is today. And what God placed in my spirit when I saw that was that is how his return is for people. Everybody's got a date that they're coming to get collected. But your date is
Mm.
Tuesday, his date is Friday, but I'm coming to get everybody. I'm coming to deal with
Everybody.
everybody. And your date might be your death, whereas his date might be when Jesus actually returns to the earth. And I was like, wow, look, I'm like, this is what my brain sees when I see a trash can at the road. So I always just thank God that my mind is always in tune to him, that he's always putting something in my spirit to, create the next little video or whatever to share, because I mean, all kinds of things just spark that illustration for me. So
That's a great gift.
yeah.
That's a
And I
great gift.
thank God for that one. That one I thank him for. All right. Here's another. Why do you think so many associate ministers are so eager to don the crown of leadership when they clearly are not ready?
It's the it's the it's part of our sinful nature that we all want to, how can I say this? It's part of our sinful nature that we all want to have power.
Mm.
And the reason that many associate ministers are so eager to get into leadership is they don't understand that authority or their perceived perspective on power is for responsibility and protection. It's not for power, and authority is never for the person.
Mm.
Power and authority is always for the people that that person is responsible for. And
Mm.
very often, people who are looking for leadership, looking to, they're looking at the perks of leadership and not the responsibilities of leadership.
Mm.
The perks of leadership is, so when they see everybody clapping when you preach, or when they see the annual day, or when they see, the respect or whatever, They want that, but they don't want to deal with that's the tip of the iceberg of leadership.
Mm.
Leadership is pain
Oh,
because
wow.
you have the responsibility for souls. You have to give an account. Hebrews chapter 13. You have to, the reason we're supposed to obey those who have leadership, obey those who rule over us, because they're going to have to give an account for it. They don't never think about that second part. That, okay, well, if I'm in leadership, I'm going to have to give an account
Mm-hmm.
for these souls.
Yeah.
And that as the under shepherd, I'm going to bleed with, I'm going to suffer with the sheep. I'm going to keep wolves off the sheep, even at the cost of my own life.
Mm.
And so, to answer the question more succinctly, part of the reason people are clamoring for leadership is they don't understand what leadership entails. And it's not about the annual days. It's not about the parking spot. It's not about, fancy suits or dresses or whatever. It's literally about laboring until Christ is formed in people. It's literally about praying and crying over, you know, um, uh, crying over someone who is grieving or somebody who needs deliverance, or
Yeah.
dealing with your own uh, issues and not letting those issues keep you from getting up and preaching or serving or whatever. And it's really just about they don't know what leadership is about, because if
Mm-hmm.
you could avoid it, now I recognize the Bible is very clear. It says, if what is that in Timothy? He
He
who
that
desires to
desires
be a
bishop.
overseer or elder
Right.
desires a noble work. But then there's some character qualifications that go with that.
Right.
And did you read the other part of Second Timothy chapter 2 that talks about that he who would live godly will suffer persecution? Or
Mm.
James chapter 3 verse 1, that not many of us should be teachers, because teachers will be held to a higher
Mm-hmm.
accountability. So it's that misunderstanding of what leadership is all about by
Mm.
focusing on the perks as opposed to the heavy lifting that it
Yeah.
requires,
The weight of it. They don't see the
the
weight,
weight of
the
it.
true
They
weight.
don't see the weight.
Yeah. When I was an assistant coach, I was like everybody's favorite dude, right? The moment I took the assistant coach hat off and put the head coaching hat on, I was the worst head coach on the planet, right? Like the same
Mm-hmm.
people that said Hosanna yesterday are saying
Right, right,
crucify him today, crucify him, and it just again shows you how heavy is the head that wears the crown, because now you're responsible. At first, I used to say I talked about that guy because he was the head coach, but now that you're the head coach, even though last week you were my favorite dude, now all of a sudden you're the most worst person on the planet because you put a different hat on. And when you was talking about this earlier, it made me think of this quote I'd heard. It was a book either I listened to or read, and it said most people want to be the noun but don't want to do the verb, right?
mm,
And I was like,
yeah,
again, so what I do is when I hear a good quote, I put it in my phone because I'm like, I'm gonna need that down the road. So most people want to be the noun. I want to be pastor. I want to be bishop.
mm,
I want to be elder. I want to be apostle. But they don't want to do the verb. They don't want to do the praying late at night. They don't want to go to the hospital. They don't want to do all those things. I'll send someone else to do that part you
right,
know and I had a young lady years ago, when I had wrote my first book. She said, man, you could be a bishop, you'd make a lot of money. And when she said that, I said, wow, that goes to show me you have no idea why a person should be in this role. Because if you want money, if this is why you do this, number one, you have your reward, is what God tells you. But number two, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of nonsense, because in order to get money, I want to keep money. I will lower the standard that I live by or teach by or whatever for the sake of money.
that's
And,
true.
again, this is another reason why I'm so slow to listen for when God says, all right, I actually do want you to serve in this capacity, because
Yeah,
I would take it ultra seriously. You know, I'm not going to take
yeah,
it lightly because, again, like you said, souls are in the balance and I'm held responsible for those souls. So, and another reason I struggle, and I told my pastor this too, I struggle when people don't like me. right? And he
Mm.
was like, brother, everybody does. I said, no, no, no. I really struggle. I don't want to lose sleep because sister so and so is upset at me, and I don't know why. Well, he said, look, they was mad at Jesus. That's what everybody said. They was mad at Jesus, and he was perfect. I hear you. I'm just saying Jesus had thicker skin than me. So I'm struggling with
Well,
that one.
you pointed out something. You pointed out two things that I think are worth highlighting. One is that just like you said, when you switched hats, all of a sudden, those who were saying one thing now they look at you a different way. The other, a slightly different angle on that is when you move from the second chariot to the first chariot, you get a bigger target on your back,
Mm-hmm.
from the enemy, because the enemy knows if the pilot goes down,
Ooh.
the whole ship is going down.
Yes.
So, of course, he's going to do everything he can, and you think you have extinguished some fiery darts, or you think that
Mm.
you've done some things where you're an associate. But brother, when you get in that first chair, but here's the good news:
Darts get
God will
bigger,
give
huh?
you grace. The
Uh,
darts will get bigger. The attacks are more intense and all that kind of stuff. But God gives you more grace if that's what He's
mm,
called you to.
yeah,
You don't want to
yeah,
go somewhere where He hadn't called you. Wherever He calls you, He's gonna give you the grace to handle that thing.
yeah,
But the other thing
absolutely.
is that uh, that as ministers, period, we have to learn how to deal with being the source of other people's disappointment, because
Mm,
a lot of people have daddy issues that they foist onto whoever they perceive to be the authority figure. And so sometimes people are mad at the pastor, and sometimes even associate ministers. Mad at pastor ain't got nothing to do with anything you did or say. They mad at their daddy. They mad at
mm.
this man or whatever, and you just happen to be the one who is close enough that they feel that um, they can spew their
Lash out to.
ire out on. So
Yeah.
you got to be able to
Wow.
recognize,
Hmm.
just as a good Christian, let alone a good minister, let alone a good pastor, you have to recognize, okay, what is the real issue here? Because I'm clearly not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against powers, principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places. So I'm not going to take personally what this person is saying or doing. Lord,
Mm.
give me discernment, wisdom, insight to see what the real root of the problem is without taking it personally,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
I can operate instead of amputate.
Mm. There it goes again. Chop
Exactly.
off that ear, Peter. Nope. She's no, don't chop off his ear. Don't chop it off. That is beautiful. All right, let me see what this one says here. I think we talked about the mentorship. Let's go to this one here. What advice would you give associate ministers on how to handle
Oh,
situations where they don't agree with leadership?
I think I have a chapter of, of, of that. Let me just say succinctly: if it's not an issue, if it's an issue of opinion, approach, if it's not a clear issue of sin, like in other words, if leadership is sinning,
Hmm.
clearly sinning, not they do it and you're just offended because they didn't do it your way. I'm talking about it's a clear violation. Well, the Bible is very clear about that in First Timothy chapter 5. Don't even entertain an accusation against an elder unless it's two or three witnesses, and then those who are guilty of something, there's a process for that. But assuming this is not an issue of sin, it's just they're making decisions, making choices, following strategies or tactics that you don't agree with, that you think there's a better way or that whatever. Well, that gets back to this whole thing that, number one, you don't see everything they see, and number two, God still holds you accountable for obedience to whom He has placed uh, in headship over you,
Mm.
and to the extent that they are wrong, that God was going to deal with that. So that's true in every area of submission. So children are supposed to obey their parents.
Hmm.
Does that mean that children will always agree with how their parents are doing something or whatever? No. Now, again, if it's not sin, if the parent is not telling you to do something that is a clear violation, of
Mm.
God's law, then obviously God's law trumps. You know, if your parent tells you to go out and steal something or go out and shoot somebody, of course you don't do that because that's a clear violation. But if they are saying something or doing something or sort of leading the family in a way and you disagree with it, you still have a responsibility as the child in the situation to obey your parents. Um, Employee, employer, same situation. I mean, you can go through all of the areas where
Yeah.
God talks about submission, and the same is true here. That as an associate minister, you have to submit to the leadership that God has in place for you. Now, hopefully, you over time have developed enough of a relationship with your leader that you can express yourself
Mm-hmm.
and share that, hey, is there a better way we could do this? I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that. But ultimately, God is going to hold them accountable
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for the leadership. And you don't want to be out of line. You don't want to be doubly out of line. If they are wrong, then let God correct them.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you be wrong too. And then now
They
you
say two.
doubly wrong. You didn't follow, and now you out here
one of
being
the guys I was in the Navy with, when you said it, made me think about what he said. He says, two wrongs don't make a right, but it makes us even. I said, that is terrible. Two wrongs don't make a right, but it sure makes us even. But it's funny you said it because I think, again, if it goes back to if I'm your associate minister, and I have served under your leadership faithfully, loyally, I serve with a spirit of excellence like you have taught me and modeled for me, and now I have a disagreement. I think if I have shown myself to be faithful to you, if you're a true man or woman of God, that I should be able to come and talk to you respectfully, voice this concern, and you as a pastor would be grateful that, you know what, I didn't see that. That's a
exactly,
lot different than me going to Sister So and So. Can you believe Pastor trying to make us do so and so? Yeah, can
exactly,
you? And now all of a
exactly.
sudden you have that spirit like Miriam speaking against Moses, and now all of a sudden you got leprosy all over you. It's like there's a way that I can handle it to where I can come to you because I have earned this right to speak to you because you have seen my service. My service has shown you I want nothing but the best for this ministry too.
Right.
So now because I'll never forget one day my pastor, I could tell he was frustrated and he was speaking from the pulpit and he said something out of frustration. It wasn't bad. It wasn't his character. It felt
Mm,
cold. And
mm.
so I texted him later that night and I was like, Pastor, I just want to share with you how this sounded. I said, now think about it. No one or people would struggle to serve a leader who may lash like this in this moment. Or if you're a new person, I might struggle to want to be a part of that ministry. There's nothing wrong with your frustration because I'm sure, again, if I was the leader, I'd be like you. I'd be trying to amputate some stuff, right?
Hmm.
And I have said this 1,000 times to these people. So now Moses is hitting the rock instead of speaking to it, right?
Right.
I get it. I'm just saying I wanted you to know how it sounded from the outside looking in. And he thanked me for sharing that with him. And I think over time we've built a rapport where he told me like last week we didn't have Bible study on Valentine's Day. He said, I'm gonna give the people Valentine's Day off to spend it's love night or whatever. However he said, I forgot what he said. He said, you're my ears, you're my eyes. What do you think? He asked my opinion. And I'm like, I'm with you, because again, if we show up and 9 of us show up, yes, we're gonna have a wonderful time. You're gonna give us the word with all the diligence you would if 50 of us showed up. But at the same time, you showing a heart for the people, knowing they want this evening for this, we'll come back together next week. It shows that
Right.
you not that you're sacrificing the integrity of the ministry, but you have your ear to the pulse of the people. And
Right.
but for him to ask me, you're my eyes. That's what he said. You're my eyes, you're my ears. What do you think? And I was like, I think it's a great idea, you know? And, but that over time, we've built that rapport that I could say to him, I don't know about that one, Pastor, And you don't think
Yeah.
so? Like, nah, I think that would be better off if we did it like this. And not that he has to do what I'm saying, but the fact that you're even willing to ask my insight, it just again validates how much I see the value that I have for you. And I would hope that for everyone who's listening that's an associate, if they found themselves in this situation, they have earned the right through their diligent service to sit with their pastor and talk about this disagreement we're having in a respectful, um, honorable way, because again, I honor
Right.
the role I honor the office that you hold, even if I don't agree with the thought process, because you're a man too. You're a woman too. I get that you might have a flawed thought process in that. And you
That's
might
right.
not have saw it from both perspectives. So,
Exactly.
but one thing I'm gonna take from you is that because I do not ride in that first chariot, I didn't see the turn that he saw. So I'm gonna ask why, is there a reason why you want to do it this way? And
Right.
and you
Right.
have the right to say, well, brother, I'll get, right now is not the right time to expose that yet, but trust me on this. I thought it through, you know, because some people will say, why don't you tell Pastor to do A, B, and C? Not tell, like, how do they say? They'll say, why don't you ask Pastor about this? And I'm like, no, I know my pastor. That's not what he's gonna want. It'll be small stuff. Like, my mom asked me another, should we take out the trash? I said, no, don't take that trash out, because if we didn't have another trash lining in, pastor's going to come in later in the week and make sure things are in order. And they're like, huh, he knows his pastor. I'm like, I like to do it the way he likes it done. Let's
See?
leave it alone. But
Yeah.
some people who don't have that mindset, it's like, well, what's the big deal? It's no big deal. It is a big deal when this is the way we like things done. So fall in line, it's like an easy thing to do, you know?
See, that gets back to something we started with at the beginning, and that is, are you in sync with the vision of the house? Not just the vision of the house, but the tone, the tenor, sort of the expectations, you know, of the house. Because sometimes, and I have a chapter on this, man, if you can't buy into the vision of this house and the way that we implement that vision, then why are you here? Because everybody that's going to heaven ain't going from this church. You could find
Right.
another ministry. But
Right.
this bus is going to this stop. That's why we got the sign on the top of the bus that we're going here. Now, as you got on the bus, you should have known, because we have the sign and we telling you this is how we
Right.
do things. This is where we're going. If you don't agree with that, it ain't no problem. We can send you to another place where you can
Mm,
flourish and you can get with that vision. But if you're going to be here, that doesn't mean the pastor's a dictator or whatever. But there's a
right.
culture that is
Right.
being created here, and there's strategies that we use. You have the right, if you have earned it, to come in and say, well, man, this is I'm struggling with. Now, how did you come to this? Blah blah blah. Or, pastor, is there a better way? Da da da. Okay, all of that's fine. But even with that, what is Proverbs talk about? A soft tongue breaketh the bone. I think that's in Proverbs 25. That there's a way
A
you can
soft
say
answer,
anything.
turn away wrath. Not that
Soft
one.
answer turns the way. No,
Uh,
there's another one in like Proverbs 25. I want to say verse 15. I could be wrong, but basically it says a soft tongue breaks a bone, and what it means
mm,
is that there's ways that you can say anything that will actually get what you. Yeah, Proverbs 25:15. For by forbearance a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue breaks the bone.
mm.
That sometimes, let me say this, underneath everything we've been saying about this question is the assumption that you're praying for your pastor. Because there's some ways that as you're praying, either God will change your perspective or change his or her perspective, or at least bring you all into some sense of understanding and agreement when you talk. That okay, I see why you're doing it. I would do it if I was in that position, I would do it differently. But I see why you're doing it that way, and I'm going to support you. You
Right.
know,
Right.
and I'm not going to give you shade like you know out among the people. Well, pastor want it done this way. Let's just go
Right.
on.
You know
No,
how
we ain't doing none of
he
that.
is. You know
Yeah, you
how
know how
he
he
is.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ain't doing none of that. We ain't doing none of that.
Leave that alone. That's the spirit I don't ever want to have, is that if I was in charge, I would. Don't do that.
Exactly.
Don't do that. You
Exactly.
know, that's one of the things that I've prayed and asked God, to never let me have that spirit of judgment of, man, shoot, that happened to me. I would, until it happens to you, you don't know what you would do. It, a
That's
lot of
true.
us, we pray. I pray I'm as strong as I believe I am. But if something happened to one of my kids, in the movie, you see the movie where the man turn around, he go and wipe out everybody who hurt his kid. I'd hope that wouldn't be me, but until it happens to you, you don't know what you might do. You don't know
That's
those
true.
feelings that might rear up in your heart that you have to, every ounce of the Holy Spirit is begging you to slow down and listen to him. If that flesh is like, nah. I
That's
watched The
true.
Equalizer too many times. I know some moves. All right, let me get you one more question and I get you out of here.
All right.
When you have great help under your leadership, you never want to lose that. What advice would you offer pastors concerning watching their associates leave the current ministry to do greater work elsewhere? And
I've had to
what's
go through.
the
Go ahead.
reason I'm asking this question, I heard a pastor on an interview the other day, and he was talking about how we use the terminology like my spiritual son, my spiritual daughter, but when they get ready to leave, there's like resentment there. But he says,
Mm.
"Does your daughter live with you now?" Like, no, my daughter's grown. She's right. So is it a daughter son thing, or is it like a spouse? Like, no. So again, you finally have a quality associate. And obviously, quality people are going to be in demand elsewhere. Or God may say, I have trained you all you can gain under the wonderful Reverend K.E. Copeland. Now I need you to go and plant a church over here with all that he has taught you. How do you handle watching that happen?
I've had to go through this several times, and the mindset that you have to develop is that it's all about the kingdom. It's not about this church.
Mm,
That we're literally, and we do. Matter of fact, I was talking to one of my sons in the ministry Sunday, and just telling him how happy that I am to see, what he's doing is growing, and the Lord is just giving him good grace and all that kind of stuff. Got to develop the mindset, in addition to what you were just saying, and I think that's a useful sort of thought that, hey, all children, the hope is, the expectation is that they grow up and go and start their own home. And in some ways, ministry can be like that in
mhm,
terms of you are not guaranteed that you're going to have this set of associate ministers your whole tenure. But the other thing is to always remember that our goal is the expansion of the kingdom, and that the kingdom is about multiplication. It's not about necessarily my situation getting bigger, but how can we multiply? Whether that be through church planning or sending associate out to some other established church where they can really just sort of spread their wings. And if we're really concerned about um, kingdom growth, if we're really concerned about exponential growth, then we're looking for ways to expand ministry, to multiply the ministry. And that might mean sending somebody out across the country or even across town to do a greater work. And
mhm,
the other thing behind that is, too, that God knows where we are, He knows what we need. And even though you might send away your right hand, you might send away somebody that feels like a pillar, or somebody who has been exceptionally faithful and loyal. The truth of the matter is that sometimes that personality might be holding up space from some others who need to come through the pipeline, but
mm,
who will never come to the forefront because this associate is doing everything or so great or whatever. I'll never forget, uh, I was an associate at a church, and when I left, And the pastor would talk about this till the day he died. When I left, it took 5 different people to do the job that I was doing.
Mm.
That's not good. Now, I tried because I knew it was when I was in school and I knew I was going to be leaving, at some point. So I tried to, and I did. I put together policy and procedure and program manuals and all that kind of stuff. So the next person wouldn't have to do anything from scratch. All you got to do is follow the playbook. And they were using that playbook literally decades after I left. But the point is, how many people would have never come to the forefront if I had stayed there? Because when I left, 5 different people who previously had not been doing whatever came up and had to do the job. So sometimes when you get a really good one, you have to trust God's timing that maybe it's time to let this one go. So the other 3 or 4 that are sitting back because they see, well, oh man, he got it, she got it, I ain't got to do nothing. They ain't never going to develop as long as that person is there.
Yeah. It reminds what you just said reminds me the other day, my oldest son, he's 14. And they had a potluck in class one day at school. And he's like, oh, Dad, I didn't bring anything for the potluck. I said, well, they had a sign-up sheet. Why didn't you sign up for something? Well, they put the sign-up sheet away. I said, well, you could email your teacher real quick and see if they still need anything. That way, you can contribute. I said, son, listen to me now. You don't want to be a consumer and not a contributor. There's so many, and I even made a video about this the other day when God placed it in my spirit to share it with him, because in the church, a lot of us are consumers. We're not contributors, right? We love what we get from our church, but we're not putting anything back in, even though you do have the gift to do 2 things. And that would actually free up this one person who's doing 8, right?
Exactly.
You can do those 2. And now this person who's on the brink of burnout can do the other 6 while God sends another person to take 2 more things off their plate.
Exactly.
The whole scope of us talking today was how we can serve so that our pastors could be the best versions of themselves, right? And I think all the stuff that we've captured today, and hopefully every associate minister, hopefully every pastor who listens and even layman who listens to this podcast or views this will also take away what I've taken away, is that, God has gifted all of us with something, right?
Right.
All of us should be willing to bring what we have to the table, but at the same time, understand our presentation of it needs to be in line with the vision of that house, right? A pastor ought to be glad I'm serving in it. No, that's the wrong spirit. You keep that service, and again, I praise God for my pastor. My pastor's very, very particular. He's very professional. He serves with the spirit of excellence. And I know that has trickled down on me in so many ways, right? I'll give you an example and then I'll let you get out of here. He was cleaning the church and he's like, brother, do you mind vacuuming? If you vacuum the sanctuary each week, I'll give you a few bucks for vacuuming the church. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm vacuuming the church, take that burden off, and so I make a few dollars every week and I'm liking that little extra change. So one day he says, well, brother, let me ask you this. Would you be willing to take over just doing the entire sanctuary? And, we'll give you a little bit of a raise. And, that pretty much, he didn't have to clean anything anymore. Just you take care of it. I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So about a month goes by and I'm doing the job, getting my little check. I'm feeling good about it. And so he comes to me after church. He says, brother, can I see you for a minute? I'm like, sure. So we go down to the front of the church where the communion table is. Yeah, I always think about this, makes me laugh. He takes his finger and he puts it on the communion table and he just walks around the table. And there's a glob of dust on his finger. He said, brother, you ain't been wiping this off? I said, oh, I didn't know I had to do that part. But he had never trained me. You see what I'm saying? That's what he was doing. I was vacuuming while he was doing all the dusting and all the stuff that
Mm,
again he assumed you knew, right? So
mm.
after that, he trained me on it. Now, after he trained me, do you think he ever found dust again? No, right? Because again, my spirit is to do it the way you would do it, right? With the same spirit of excellence. We value the house of God. We
Right,
cherish and honor the house of God. So we handle things in this house differently than we would handle in our own house. Now, the beauty of it is once you learn to serve like that in the house of God, it's going to impact how you serve in your personal house, right? So I can't come in here and clean up and then go home and I ain't finna clean up nothing. Now I live in a pigsty at home. No, I'm used to cleanliness. I'm used to excellence here. Excellence goes everywhere I go, you know? And so
right,
I praise
right.
God for having a leader who has instilled in me a desire to do anything your name is attached to, it should be the best version of it. Do everything as unto the Lord. I don't care what it is, right? So
Mm.
I praise God for that. And I'm hoping that everybody who has listened and has heard all the questions and all your explanations, I really do appreciate this time I've had with you. And again, I say this because now let's go back to your book. How
Uh-huh.
can they find a copy? Well, where do they go?
Now, so the book is still in print. Do not look for it on Amazon. Um, I have a Writing in the Second Chariot Facebook page, but they can contact the church because I'm in the process of writing another book, and I really want to update this one. But they
Mm.
can contact our church. The book is only $10 a copy, so don't go on to Amazon because I think I've seen it on Amazon for like $99 or something.
I wasn't
Uh,
gonna say nothing, but I saw that too. I was like, wow.
no,
Dang.
no, it's it's $10 a copy, and that's for the one you have on the screen is the revised and expanded. I'm getting ready to do another uh, edition before the end of this year, and if you pray for me, I'm trying to write one for ministers' wives too.
Mm.
But you can get it by contacting our church, the New Zion, all of our churches' social media tags, or what do you call them? The way
Yeah.
you could find us
The
is New
handles.
Zion Rockford. Yeah,
Hmm.
New Zion Rockford, and we come up on anything, Instagram or Facebook, whatever, YouTube, and you can contact the church and you can get the book um, from here. If you pray
Okay.
for me, by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll have better ways for you to get in contact with us and to purchase the book for yourself. Quite frankly, be honest with you, I'm still surprised that it's still selling. And like
Don't
I
be
said, I'm trying
surprised.
to
I'm
work
telling
for.
you. I It's funny again. I thanked you earlier because again, the way it's such an easy read, but it's not just easy, it's enjoyable. Now,
Mm,
of course, again, I have a desire to learn these things. So for me, it's super enjoyable. I think anybody that would pick up this book to want to read it would have a desire to know these type of things, and they would be tremendously blessed. Again, this is a copy my dad sent me, right? So
wow.
he told me when you talk to him, ask him how come I can't find no copies of his book. But now you know, Pop, you know where you gotta go. Go to the church's website and you can find a way to get it. He said it's $10 a copy. You ain't got to go to Amazon and spend 90 cents.
No.
When I saw that,
And,
I saw one that said new for like two something. And I was like, wow, somebody is really trying to capitalize. They know the value that's in this book and that people might not know how to find them, but now they're gonna know because we're gonna tell them.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
like I said, you pray for us so that by the fall we'll have, because we used to have a website. Now I'll be honest, after I started pastoring and I'm trying to take care of some other stuff. We have. I'm working with a group called Administer Justice, where we're trying to get gospel justice centers all over the country. That is free church-based legal clinics.
Mm.
Working with some other projects that I just haven't had time. I'm like, you know what? Um, enough people have been bugging me that I'm gonna do an updated version. I'm going ahead and finish this one for ministers' wives, and then we'll get the website back up so you can easily uh, get it. But right
Yeah.
now, just contact New Zion Rockford, the website, on Facebook, uh, Instagram, whatever, and we'll be happy to get a book out to you. And we do give discounts to, like, if it's a like a district association or like a seminary class or something
When you
like
open
that,
multiple
where
copies like that.
there'll be multiple copies.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to get it. We're not trying to really make money. We're just trying to get it out there.
Yeah, yeah. I highly recommend it, everybody. You listen to me. I've never steered you wrong. You got to grab your copy. Get one for everybody in your church that wants to serve the Lord, that has a hunger. And if they don't have a hunger, get them one anyway, because they might develop that hunger down the road. Again, Pastor, I really do appreciate you and your time. I know it's valuable, and I told you about an hour, and I took a little bit more than an hour, so I apologize.
No problem. I'm glad we finally get to connect face to face, and appreciate what you're doing. It's a tremendous ministry, and obviously you're very gifted at it. And I just pray that God will just keep expanding your borders and just open up more doors for you and give you clarity as it relates to your calling.
Amen. I receive that. All right, everybody. There you have it. Another episode in the books. I hope that you were blessed like I was blessed. I was tremendously blessed. And I'm probably going to listen to this one a few more times because there's some nuggets, there's some wisdom that's in there that you might have missed if you were listening with a distracted ear. So go back, listen again. And again, if you want to grab a copy, go to the church's website. You can find all that information. I'll put it in the description of the video, the show notes for the podcast, and make sure you can get you a copy. Because again, I don't read a lot. So if I tell you a book was good, a book was good. All right. Watch it, share it, and live it. Now let's get busy living the life. God bless you.